when you find a fear, just walk into it, walk towards it. What happens when you walk? It disappears. Right?
Yeah.
Behind it is something much more beautiful, much more infinite than the fear.
Welcome to Alignment Adventures. This is a podcast where we explore what it means to live a fulfilling, aligning, and present life. I'm your host, Linda Tanner, and I am so grateful that you are here. Hello, my loves, and welcome back to another episode of Alignment Adventures. As always, I am so grateful and so excited that you decided to join me today for another aligning and expansive and enlightening conversation with Australian kinesiologist Ian Haycroft. Now, I am still just mind blown how we can have conversations with people across the world in real time. I know that's not new technology, but it is magical. Like when we use technology with intention to connect, it is magical what we can create. And we talk about such profound, deep topics with someone that I just met across the world. Just so beautiful and so synchronistic. So grateful for that. But we discuss a lot of different things per usual. We always start talking about what it means to live an aligning life. Of course, Ian shares what he does in his work with kinesiology. I kind of had a misconstrued view of kinesiology, or at least a limited view of what that modality is from my biology background. I'm like, isn't that just movement of the body? But it's a lot more energetics and emotional and just a lot deeper than I initially thought, especially in other parts of the world and how they use it. So it's really interesting to hear how Ian uses it to help people live truly their most aligning life. He is also the father of 6 children, so I managed to squeeze some parenting advice out of him. I'm just always looking for that and love to be a sponge on how other people are parenting or how they're going about that process, because that is a whole other journey. And we also talk about surrendering, our mind getting in the way, and how you can truly heal yourself. Now, also, if you haven't been checking out these interviews on my YouTube channel, go and check this one out, because Ian has his background as his view from his countryside house in Australia, and it just looks so beautiful. So it really transports you to where he is living right now. So with all that being said, let's get right into the conversation. I know you guys are going to love this one. And thank you so much for coming on Alignment Adventures. I'm just so honored and, like we were saying before, mind blown that I get to talk to someone across the world. And your background is where you are at right now. If you guys are watching on YouTube, it is beautiful and stunning. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Pleasure, joy, pleasure. Yeah.
Well, let's start off with the usual question, and you can answer this in any way, as deep or as shallow as you want, but who is Ian Haycroft?
Yeah, I think, the kind of answers we give to these questions change over time, don't they? So
Yes.
now I often say that, I'm kind of at the later end of life, at least the physical part of life, right?
Yeah.
So really different answer than I might have given sometime when I was full on working and all those things. But, I think that we all humans are a reflection of presence and awareness. So that's who I am in my own unique way, as is everybody, right? So for me, it's more and more these days, who is this person? How do I get to express that presence and awareness in everyday life? Yeah. So it's kind of a funny way to answer who am I, but that's who I am. And, and then the things that are part of who I am is, I'm a dad.
Mm-hmm.
My wife Kim and I have 6 kids, so
Mm-hmm.
5 grandchildren. So I can't think of who I am in this world at this time without feeling that that's important, really important.
Mm-hmm.
Who I am, and I think the other part that it seems to be part of what's been through my life a lot is I've always had this feeling that we can do something to change things. So And for many years it was like, you're just a crazy idealist, right? But and maybe I still am, but when I look through my life, it feels like that's something that's part of who I am too. It's can't get rid of this idea that I think we can actually make a difference. So
That's
that's my
beautiful.
short answer.
I love that answer. I love when people go deep with that. Who am I? Like at my core, when you keep going down and down beyond the labels, beyond all the things, you're right. We are presence and awareness. And I agree too. I have that deep sense of knowing that we're here to do something big, to make big shifts. I always wonder this, like with talking to people, and this is why I'm in this work. Like it seems like a lot of us have forgotten that we are presence and awareness. Why do you
Mm.
think that is? It's a deep question. It's a
That is-
hard one to answer, but I ponder it all the time. I'm like, why have we forgotten our truth?
Yeah. I think there's, several libraries full of attempted answers, but I think my short answer is I don't know, right? But
Yeah.
I think that's what we're called to do. We're called to remember.
Hmm.
And so I think this life, the amount of time that we're on the planet is for us to discover that we are the presence, right? And I was thinking recently, right? I think and this is just my own feeling about it, is I think one of the fundamental elements of awareness, presence, God, whatever you want to call it,
Hmm.
is freedom. Is
Mm.
freedom. I think along with peace and love, in the essence of awareness is freedom.
Mm.
So we need to experience what freedom's like, and often freedom is like losing it or feeling trapped,
Yeah.
or making decisions, the freedom to make decisions. So I'm sure there's lots of philosophers who will talk about free will in very sophisticated ways, but for me it seems that we have to have had the experience of the responsibility and the mistakes that comes with having freedom, so that
Mm.
we achieve it, when we actually discover that feeling of wanting to be free, the paradox is ultimately when you get to that point, you realize just surrender, let awareness do the worrying about that stuff. Then you realize, actually, I don't need to feel like, I have free will. Actually, my experience is the closer you get to the experience of being awareness, the less you're worried about, free will. It's, it's the freedom that's essentially part of awareness that will act the way it wants to act through us.
Yeah. Mm.
So,
That's so beautifully said. And yeah, free will is a tricky part of this experience because I feel like we came here with a purpose and maybe some things we set out to learn, but then free will comes in and who knows where that takes us on this wild journey. So you kind of answered a lot of beautiful things there, but I want to get into my next question I always ask, just in theme with what a lot of us share, in this space. But what does living in alignment mean to you?
well, I think, the question comes, alignment to what, right? So
Mm.
I think the way I usually say it is that I think we all have a wisdom within, meaning
Yeah.
we are all connected to a part of awareness.
Yes.
So that's what we want to align to. We want to align to that wisdom, that life.
Yeah.
So how to do that, I think, is by pausing enough to remember who we really are.
Mm.
And so I think, and I was thinking about this morning because I had your questions beforehand, so I was writing stuff down, right? So I think for me it comes in two ways. One is some days I meditate and
Yeah.
ponder life over a cup of coffee and connect with what feels to me to be the presence within, the
Yeah.
wisdom within. And so when I feel that, then I just make sure I've got that remaining with me in whatever I'm going to do that day, whether it's shopping or working or whatever it is I'm doing. And other days, because I've got this walk, as the picture kind of, I walk on a dirt road most mornings in amongst the trees. And so another way of aligning is actually, because if you look at the trees, the birds, the weird Aussie animals and those things, they show you the same thing, that they all are arising from awareness. They're all part of this amazing dream of God, right? So that brings you to the same place, right? So it's not just sitting on a cushion looking within, but also take a walk and look at trees. I mean, it's enough to make you cry. You know what I mean? It's enough. If you want to get aligned, then look how amazing it is, right? And I feel really blessed to be able to live in a place like this. But I have lived, in New York City and Shanghai, and I've lived amongst all the noise and the traffic and the grime, and and it is a bit more difficult in that situation, right? But even those situations, if we can connect with who we essentially are, then we can see that in everything. Not as easy in big cities, I think, sometimes, because it feels so chaotic and cut off, right?
Yes.
Apparently cut off, but it doesn't have to be.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I'd love, and I'm sure everyone listening are very curious about your journey, how you got to where you are now. So maybe you want to give us the long version or the Cliff Notes version, whatever feels resonant and aligning for you in this moment. But did you always have this connection to your awareness, or is it something that's just kind of slowly grown over time?
Well, I think we all have a connection to awareness because it's what we are. We just don't know it, right? We just don't remember it. So,
For sure.
So did I always feel it? Nope.
Yeah.
But in retrospect, I mean, one silly example is when I was young and at university, I played Aussie rules, Australian rules football, right? And I loved it, and I think I was pretty good at it, right? And I used to, I just loved it and played it. And about probably, I don't know, 5 years later, after I finished, moved on from doing that, I started meditating, and I realized, this feeling I'm having meditating is the same thing I used to feel when I played football. It's like, okay. It's that, beyond the sense of beyond time and space, people call it flow, right? I mean, flow, I think flow is just a kind of further along the path towards realizing that we are awareness by nature, right? But that sense of there's something beyond what looks like is in front of you.
Yes.
So no, I didn't always have it, right? But and the short version of a pretty long story is how I got here is I left Australia in 1977 because I'd been through university and all the grand plans I thought I had were just, none of them were materializing, and life looked like suffering. And I went, I don't want to do this. So I did what a lot of people in Australia in those days used to do. It's like, I'll take a year off and I'll go see the world. So I took a year off and I went to India, and I was sure I was going to find my guru and reach enlightenment within 2 months. And surprise, surprise, I didn't. What I did find within 2 months, what I got amoebic dysentery, and I was so sick I had to leave and go to London to I had to fly to London. I could have flown back to Australia, but I was determined not to do that. That would kind of be failure, right? So, I thought it would be failure. So I went to London and stayed in the hospital for a couple of weeks to get better. And then I was like, well, here I am. So and I was really interested in those days in communities, right? So, and I was a bit of a hippie. I had hair, kind of hair like yours. I don't have that anymore, right? But I had hair like yours, and
I can
and
picture it.
yeah. So I lived on a community in Wales for a while. That was really about sustainable living, and then I made the mistake of falling in love, and then I went to the US, and again, and then my grand idea of being in love with an American fell apart, and I hitchhiked, so I hitchhiked across America and stayed on different communities, and then I met my now wife. So we've been married, I don't know, 40 more years. So,
Wow.
and my plan to go back to Australia, I was going to go back to Australia within a year. Well, we eventually came back to Australia 22 years later, right? So I got married, stayed in America. We had 6 kids in America. And mostly I worked in international relief work, doing projects in different countries.
Mm-hmm.
As we started increasing the number of children, then the kind of salary I could get from a not-for-profit wasn't working. So then I got a job in a for-profit business. And my job was to go around looking at investment opportunities in different parts of the world to do due diligence and come back to the board and recommend or not, that investment. And one of them was a vegetable export business in China. Wow. And the board liked it and said, well, who are we going to get to run it? And they said, well, you're the one who knows the most about it. Do you want to go to China and run it? And in a moment of insanity was, you can imagine, we had 6 small, blonde-haired, very Western-looking children. We went to live in China. Wow. In 1996, and I started working on this vegetable export business, and after a year and to say that it was tough is a bit of an understatement. It was early days of China being the kind of, wasn't the economic giant that it is now, and it was really hard. Anyway, short version, it was really hard, and so Kim and I decided it wasn't good for the kids. The pollution was just terrible. So we decided that Kim and the kids would go live in New Zealand, where it was nice, fresh air and all those things. And I'd finish off my couple of years left in the contract in China and go backwards and forwards, fly home every 6 weeks or so for a week and, pretend I was a dad and then go back to China. And it was a perfect formula for insanity and divorce, actually. So it was pretty hard. But actually, that's in China is where I had what I guess what I would say an experience that changed my life. So, because in the evenings I was by myself in China. My wife and kids were in New Zealand. I was lonely. The business wasn't working, and I used to sit by this fish farm in the evenings and pray. In those days, I had a kind of more traditional way of praying, and I was very I was raised in Anglican, right? So I pray very respectfully, and God forgive me for being such a jerk and a sinner, and please help the world, and please help my family. A very important, but that kind of prayer. But this particular occasion, I lost the plot, right? And I'm a pretty glass half full kind of person, but I was definitely glass almost empty stage and about to crack, I think. And I started to pray, and then I just launched into abuse of God. and I called God every possible name under the sun and swore blasphemously at God and just had it out, right? And the translation without swearing was, I ain't happy. I don't want anything to do with you anymore, because nothing I understand to be true is happening, and so you can just go away. And somewhere in about half an hour or 45 minutes, I don't know what, I just was overcome with this experience of how deeply I was loved. I just, beyond words, really, wordless, right? but it was also this feeling. I felt like God was kind of not laughing, but kind of saying, finally. So finally you got real. Finally you stopped pretending, and now you get being real. And so I'll be real back, right? So here's what it feels like. And it was life-changing, really. I had that experience, and from that point on, when I see people, I can't not love them. It's not like that special, right? But it's just this sense that humans, wow, right? So it was that. I think, I mean, historically in the Christian tradition, you'd say it was a Holy Spirit experience, or in other traditions, enlightenment or awakening, and it's not for me to just say I'm enlightened or awakened. There was an experience that was undeniable and impossible to describe.
Wow.
And so kind of changed my life. So, no, not kind of, it did. And so that contract ended, and Kim and I decided that we would live in Australia, because Australia was my home. And I loved America. I still love America, right? And our kids are all American or dual citizens now. But we just felt like we could, or I felt and Kim felt, that we could give the kids a quality of life in Australia that's possible in America. You just have to be pretty well off, right? So we came back to Australia. And it was I was 47? And it was one of those moments, and I'm sure you've had them, and probably every person listening, you have those different moments in your life where you go, oh, now what am I going to do? For me, it was like, now what am I going to do when I grow up? I cannot do this corporate thing, and it's killing me. It's killing my marriage. I can't do it. So what am I going to do? I've got 6 small children I got to support. So it's not like I can just, bliss out. So I really had another moment with God saying, okay, I don't know what to do, but I need to do something. And I had this experience when someone gave me a pamphlet for this thing called kinesiology, which is one of the natural health therapies, right? And I was looking to understand what I could do, and my whole body lit up. And so I went to the talk and listened to this person talking, and I went, oh, I could do that. I could do that. I think I'll do that. So I trained, and I opened a clinic in Noosa, which is a beautiful beach resort place on the Sunshine Coast in Australia, which is a beautiful spot. And so I became a kinesiologist, started treating people with this kind of out there, natural therapy, which is I still do. So, but these days I don't have a clinic by the sea anymore, where humans actually can't do it all online. And part of after our kids grew, and we only had one child left at home, Meg. She wanted to go to a special school in Brisbane she's a singer. So we thought, and one of my clients said, do you want to help me start a business? And I went, I'm not going to do corporate. I'm not going to wear a tie. None of that. And he went, no, it's going to be different. So I helped start a financial services business also. So these days I split my time between working a bit with that business, which is a crowdfunding business, and doing the online kinesiology, which I call Clear Mind. Just working with people and all over the world, right, on Zoom. It's weird. So that's kind of a longer, took longer than I meant to, but that's the kind of short version of a long story.
I mean, it was fascinating. Fascinating. Do you know what it reminded me of? I'm sure you've read this book, but The Surrender Experiment.
Yeah.
Your life reminded me of Michael Singer's The Surrender Experiment, how you just kind of kept flowing through different circumstances, and you had these aha moments that led you to the next step. And even, through those moments that seemed so hopeless, it just was a stepping stone into what your purpose was. Now, I do want to dive into kinesiology, because as someone that grew up in the United States and majored in biology, I'm like, I feel like our definition of kinesiology over here and how you guys use it are different. Like here,
Yeah.
from my understanding, it's just like the study of the movement of the body, but it sounds like such a deeper, more energetic spiritual practice in Australia or maybe other parts of the world. So could you tell us a little bit more about what do you do with
Yeah.
kinesiology and how can that benefit us and help us live our most aligned lives?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's true. I mean, the dictionary definition and the degrees you can get in the States are about movement of the body and the
Mhm.
musculature, right? That's kinesiology. But there's actually and it's not really connected to that. But in the 70s, as this modality appeared, 1970s, I mean,
Mhm.
these modalities appeared. This modality called applied kinesiology, right?
Mm.
Which and there's lots of applied kinesiologists in the States, lots, right? In fact, it's probably the most popular. I mean, the place in the world there, this is the most applied kinesiologists, right?
Yeah.
And kinesiology has become a bit like a lot of religions, right? It's like, no, my system's the best. No, my system's the best. No, yours isn't right. All that happens, right? So actually, what I say to people is, I use the muscle testing system of kinesiology. There's lots of kinesiologists who would say, oh, he's not really a kinesiologist. So, but without getting into all of that, I'll tell you how I describe what I do.
Yeah.
It probably doesn't describe all applied kinesiology. Well, it certainly doesn't. But the way I describe what I do is to say that everything that's ever happened to us in our life on a physical and a chemical and an emotional and an energetic level is recorded within us, in the
Mm.
cells and in the energy that gives life to those cells. And that's a lot of information.
Yeah.
So if you think about it from an iceberg, kind of, if you use that analogy, we cannot store all that information consciously. It's just way too much information. So we have this amazing system in our who we are, where we store those things unconsciously, right? So
Mm.
the tip of the iceberg of our consciousness is what we think it is, right? And then the rest of that iceberg is information and patterns that are stored unconsciously. By definition,
Mm.
you don't know them. You can't access them consciously, right?
Mm.
And so then this technique was developed, which is a muscle test. And
Mhm.
lots of people will know it because these days a lot of chiropractors use it, a lot of naturopaths will use a muscle test where, and it's hard to do on Zoom, but you can hold a person's arm up and you can push down and the muscle system will respond
Wow.
strongly or weakly depending on the body's reaction to whatever it is you're testing. So,
Wow.
it actually becomes an interesting party trick, so you can get say an organic apple and have people hold it against their chest and have them hold their arm out and you can push down on the arm and you'll get a really strong response, right? You can then take the apple away and give them a can of Coca-Cola and hold that to their chest and push down that, and they cannot hold it up, right? Because the system knows organic apple, it's basically good. I'm okay with this. Coca-Cola, even if you like it, your system doesn't like it. It's hard work for the system. And the muscle system responds. So it's this idea that our musculature reflects the mind-body connection we have.
Mhm. Mm.
And so a strong response will be your system saying, I'm okay with this. A
Yeah.
weak response will be, there's something I'm not okay about with this. And so I use that muscle testing technique. And of course, I can't put my arm through computers, but I can use my muscle system to test you or anybody, right? So I can get a strong or a weak response. And so then I just use the strong or weak response as a way to ask the mind-body system about whatever issue. So people will come to me with all kinds of, issues from I've got a sore toe to I've got a sore marriage, right? People have all kinds of stuff in the imbalance or issues in their life. And so we can use the muscle test as a way to narrow, it's a binary. We get a yes or a not yes, right? And
Yeah.
so we can eliminate, is it, physical, chemical, or emotional, energetic? And I've literally got charts all over my walls, which are just a system that I use
Yeah.
to narrow down, to get more specific about what might be the issue at hand. And because it's the unconscious, there's a lot of stuff in the unconscious, and most of the stuff that's filed in our unconscious is filed perfectly well, even some of the hard things, right? But there are some things that, usually because they were filed so young in our life, that they could have been filed better, or there's an emotional attachment that is really quite powerful, and it influences stuff in our lives and we don't even realize it. So hence people, become claustrophobic, or, have issues with intimacy, or, you name it. People have issues because of experiences they've had, mostly as kids, that impacts their life. So we just go on a magical mystery tour of discovery using a muscle test, right? And I always say to the people I work with, the healer in the room's not me, it's them. And I think there's a point at which, the way, the system that I use, and lots of kinesiologists use very similar kind of approaches, it's wonderful, but there's a point at which it becomes a spiritual process, right? Because you can discover unconscious patterns. So many people have the pattern that I'm not good enough, right? Or I'm not worthy of this, or I'm, or, they really struggle with lots of things. There comes a point where, we can keep digging. We can find a few thousand of those if you want, but there comes a point where I think we get to, or people can discover, these are just stories. Right? Stories that we've needed at certain points in our life just to survive. So it's not like, oh, there's something wrong with you. I always say to people, there's nothing wrong with you. You are infinite awareness. I can't feel it. I'd say, yeah, because there's just a bit of crap in the way. There's just a bit of stuff in the way. But we just need to, begin the process of moving the kind of obstacles away. And then people actually discover, something much more fundamental about themselves. So my goal always is not to have people, come back every fortnight for the rest of your life. Fortnight. Americans don't use fortnight. Right? So come back every 2 weeks,
I like that better.
Yeah. So it's about, I think for me, it becomes a process of helping people discover that underneath the story, there's something actually incredible, right? I mean, in Zen Buddhism, it's often said, when you find a fear, just walk into it, walk towards it. What happens when you walk? It disappears. Right?
Yeah.
Behind it is something much more beautiful, much more infinite than the fear. So for me, and particularly more in the last few years, it's just become clear that the real healing is, it's not emotional or energetic or physical or chemical. It's something deeply spiritual. And that we can actually get to the point of realizing, this is who I am. I am presence. I am infinite peace, who just happens to be suffering. Then I can embrace the suffering too. It's just something. It's not, it doesn't have to run my life, because my life is much, much bigger, much, much more unfathomably amazing than what I'm suffering. So I don't, and I'm always careful, right? Because I don't want to, people really do go through some deeply painful experiences and suffer in their lives. So it's not like, it's just your ego. That doesn't work, right? It's true. It is your ego, but your ego is not evil, right?
Yeah.
From my point of view, I love David Hawkins' work, and he has a beautiful, I think, way of talking about the ego. He says, the ego is not evil. It's just the extension of the the evolutionary
Yeah.
survival instinct. So it just tries to figure out a story that'll help you survive, right? But
Mm,
ultimately, we want to not have to be pushed around by the stories.
yeah.
And some of those stories are connected to deeply painful things, but none of them are bigger than who we are, right? So the healing, I think, is the discovery of who we really are. Then
Mm.
we can approach that which appears to be suffering from a totally different perspective. And people find peace when they never thought they could.
I know this episode is good, but so is this announcement. So, as you guys know, I have been on a mission to help as many people as possible live their most aligning lives. And that is why I created my first ever class. Yes, I'm going back to the quote unquote classroom as a teacher and teaching my first class, Live Your Most Aligned Life. It is starting on March 6th and it will be 8 weeks long. And we will have a live class, which is online through Zoom, every Monday at 7 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. And it will be focused on a topic around living your most aligning life, from practicing gratitude to connecting to your internal guidance to setting intentions and using the law of attraction to surrendering, and also working through those limiting beliefs, those mind stories, those things that are stopping you, that are keeping you stuck and feeling unfulfilled. We're going to work through that stuff, and you're going to get all these tools that you can use as you step into your highest self so you can go on living your most aligning life. So like I said, each week will include a live class where we will talk about the topic of that week. And then starting week 2, we will also be doing internal guidance work. So yes, just like you've heard on the few episodes I've had recently, I will be getting you into your internal guidance and asking your internal guidance questions relating to your life so you can start connecting and living and acting and making decisions from that space, that part of you, because it is part of you that loves you so much. When you tap into that space and start living from your internal guidance, guys, it is pure magic. And I just want to share that with as many people as possible. Each week, you will also get a yoga flow and a meditation aligned to the topic of that week, as well as some aligned actions, or I guess you could call them homework. We're just kind of rebranding that word, again, pertaining to the topic of that week. You will also get one 60-minute one-on-one internal guidance session with myself. So we'll be doing some internal guidance work within the live classes with everyone. So you'll get to hear other people getting into their internal guidance, but you will also get your own personalized 60-minute one-on-one internal guidance session to really make sure you have and find that connection. I want to help as many of you as I can really tap into that energy. And what's cool is once you get in that energy, you know how to do it. And again, you can take that throughout your life and tap into it more and more and more. You will also get access to a group chat with all of your classmates and myself so you can ask questions and get support really at any time throughout this process. And it's also going to be a space where we can celebrate and connect, because I know sometimes when you're on this journey, it can feel really lonely when no one else around you is going through this stuff or trying to live this way or connected to their internal guidance. So I want to create a space where we can really support and love each other. I've noticed so many of us love to consume this content and we love to take in all this stuff and it makes sense. And we're like, yes, this is how we should live, but we struggle implementing it. That is why I've created this course. So you can stop feeling stuck and actually embody and implement these concepts to help you live your most aligning life. So if you're interested, I will leave a link in the show notes or the description wherever you are listening to this episode. Make sure you sign up before March 6th so you can get in before we get started with class. And this is the first time I'm running it, so it's a super discounted offer. As always, check in with your internal guidance. Do you have the nudge to join us? If you do, I encourage you to follow that nudge, and I would be honored to have you in Live Your Most Aligned Life. See you in class. What a beautiful way to look at the ego. I love that. It's just helping us survive, and it's doing the best that it can with what it has. Because you're right. I can kind of get in that mentality too, where like, I just want to get past this, or like, dang mind or dang ego for like making me think that. But it's just doing the best it can. And it blows my mind as you were telling this story and as you're explaining kinesiology, that here in the West, the way we treat and approach illness is so backwards compared to everything that you just described, which basically that all of our disease and illness comes from within, from these cellular memories or wounds we have within us. It's just mind blowing. So I thank you for sharing that. And, hopefully with these messages, we can help more and more people realize this. And instead of going and getting like prescriptions or whatever, they can go in and do the real healing, which is just connecting with their true self. And that's another thing you said. I'm having so many like pings in my awareness. Like, it's not about adding more things. That's something that I've realized in my journey too. Like the mind, the ego wants to add more things. Like, I need to go and get this or do that. But it's really about releasing things and just getting back to your true self. So beautiful.
Yeah. I mean, I think, this the self-help industry is based on people trying to, if I just learn one more thing, I'll be okay. Just learn this, if I just learn that, right? And I think that's all important, right? I mean, I think it is important, that journey, right? But I don't think it's not the ultimate solution. The ultimate solution is to discover who we really are. And that's deeper than anything we put in our minds, right? Which is kind of mind-blowing, right? Is to you have to discover awareness. Well, you can't discover it with your mind. And your mind goes, what?
So what do I do?
That's right. So often I think people are kind of cracked open to that experience by suffering, right? Because it's like their mind can't deal with it. And it's like, that's it. When you lost your mind, that's the moment to potentially celebrate, right?
Yeah.
But again, I never want to take it lightly, because people struggle deeply with stuff, right? And even Western medicine, though there's many parts of the pharmaceutical industry and those things that disturb me, right? But if I've got a brain problem, I'll go to a brain surgeon, right? So, but I think one of the things that has happened is that people have given over their agency to heal themselves or work on themselves to someone else who may be pushing a bottle of drugs, right? And again, not that doctors are all evil and that it's all, I don't, most people I know who are doctors, particularly I went to university, I had lots of friends who were studying medicine. They weren't evil megalomaniacs. They wanted to help people, right? So, so it's not like, oh, they're all evil. But I think one of the things we do need to do is recognize that we can actually take back within ourselves our capacity to heal, right?
Yeah.
And if we heal on the most profound levels, then we can deal with whatever, illnesses come up, right? I mean, at some point we're going to die of something, right? So it's okay. It's just, I think, because I think most of that which ails us starts energetically, right? So, and we don't know what to do with it, and then usually then shows emotionally. And if we don't know what to do with that, then it'll at some point start to show chemically and physically. And so many of those things that we think or that manifest as illnesses have their origins somewhere else, right? So, when I work with people, I say it's physical, chemical, emotional. And if I find something physical and chemical, I'll say, you need to go talk to a naturopath or go see a chiropractor or an osteopath, because I don't do that. So I work mostly on the emotional and the energetic, which for me inevitably leads to the deeper questions. Who are we?
Well, I love what you said too about like, I'm not the healer, you are. That's very powerful, and letting the people take their power back of, I can heal myself.
Yeah, absolutely. Because for sure, you can't be healed by somebody else.
have to be willing, that free will.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah. So that's again the short version of kinesiologists. There's lots of applied kinesiologists who do things all kinds of different ways, right? I mean, I've got a friend who is an applied kinesiologist, and his whole clinic is based on finding people's allergies, right? They have an allergy to milk or to seeds or wheat, right? And he literally does all this testing, and he's amazing what he finds, right? So that's great. I just don't, that's not my gig,
Yeah. No. Well, I think we each came here with our unique gifts and purposes. And is
Yeah.
that something that you kind of discover through your work, is like helping people connect? Well, it's helping them come back to their true selves, but a lot of times do you help people find like kind of their purpose?
Yeah. I mean, well, I think our purpose is within us, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's not about, well, it's more about, I think, freeing people of their what they're suffering enough to go, what was I born to do, right? So I often work with people on what do you feel is, I call it your noble purpose. What is your noble purpose? What is the thing that you feel like, yeah, I was born to do this. I was born to do this. And what happens in our world is, because we're then, there are things we love to do, and then someone says, yeah, but you got to make a living and you got to work, right?
Yes.
And we often feel like, oh well, I'll put off what I was born to do because I got
Yeah.
to make money. I mean, I have been there. Trust me, I have been there. 6 small kids. I have worked in jobs which were like, you know, and so I have the benefit of hindsight. Now I'm older, I can look back and go, actually, I never lost that which I, because I would say, what is my noble purpose? And I've felt this for many decades. I want to help people discover who they really are. That's what gets me out of bed, right?
Yeah.
But I used to think you had to do it in all kinds of very spiritual ways, and I had to become a great guru like teacher, blah blah blah, none of which I am. And these days, more and more, I realize every little thing you do can help people discover who they really are. Just the smallest things, just the way we talk to people, the way we look at people, the way we interact, everything, right? So there were times in my life where I felt like I'm just working and I hate this work, and it's got nothing to do with what I think is my noble purpose, which is to help people discover who they are, right? But actually, the things that I thought were getting in the way didn't have to stop me doing that, So yeah, I had to make money to support my family and all those things. In retrospect, now I would have done it with less resentment, all this angst, So I try to help people get to that earlier, so they don't have to have as much angst doing it, right? So
Well, I feel like you're speaking right to me, and I'm sure know a lot of people can relate. A lot of people compromise or feel like they're compromising their alignment or being true to themselves because they have to make a paycheck. And, that's what I loved about your journey, is it kind of led you on the path to where you needed to be. And each of the things that you did was something you needed to do to be doing what you're doing now. So it's just
yeah,
an interesting way to look at life.
yeah, and I mean, it is one of the benefits of age, I think, right? Is that you realize, there was actually some purpose that was, in amongst all the things I did. And
Yeah.
if I had been more open, I could have avoided the angst and the frustration and the feeling worthless and useless and what am I doing? I want to do something worthwhile, all of those things.
Yeah.
The fact is, until we create that world where we don't need to build paychecks the way we do now, then
Yeah.
it's part of what is, right? So but, I think sometimes we get so frustrated that because we don't feel any connection to what we feel we're meant to do, right?
Yeah.
So I just, again, in retrospect, it's patience, right? Because I think if we constantly surrender, okay, this is what I really want to do, I'll find a way, I'll keep working towards it, then
Yeah.
doors open.
Yes.
But my experience is they rarely seem to open on our timetable.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, I want this door to open so I can really fulfill my purpose. Hello.
Where are you?
That's right. Is anybody out there? Right. So I think, and again, one of the analogies I love that David Hawkins uses, he says that God has got a fishing rod and he's got his hook and line into you and is drawing you inevitably towards full awakening, right? And you think you can stop it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's like, as the Borg would say, resistance is futile. Right?
Yes.
If we could actually surrender to the fact, I am headed towards fully understanding who I am, and doors will open.
Yes. I love that. Let's talk about surrender, because I think a lot of people misinterpret that word as giving up, doing nothing, throwing the towel in, when it's not. That's the ego's perspective of it, I guess, right? Surrendering.
Yeah.
What is true surrender to you? Because that's a word I hear from my intuition all the time, like surrender, allow.
Yeah. Well, I guess for me is, and I use God for awareness because God is just something I'm comfortable with, right?
Yes.
So we all arise from awareness from God. This whole universe, right? That we can't even begin to measure it, right? There's trillions of suns, multi-trillions of planets, right? That we can't even begin to measure how large it is, how big it is, right? And we're part of that. We are absolutely the awareness that creates all that constantly, right? So just to, it's an incredible understatement to say that's pretty big.
Yeah.
And so it seems to me not unreasonable to think that there's lots of things about life and living that I don't understand. I just, so much, I don't know how this works. So if that's true, then things happen in my life that I don't know how to deal with, right? Or are painful, right? Then for me, it's like I surrender that, meaning I don't know what it is. I don't know how it fits, but I surrender it to you, God, because I don't know what to do with it. Doesn't mean, for me, that's actually being responsible for the fact that I don't know everything.
Yeah.
And that there may well be a reason for it that I have no idea, right? I just see this so many times that things happen in our life, and at the moment we think, this is terrible. This is like the worst. I can't stand this, right? And then 10 years later, you realize it was one of the most amazing gifts you have, or you don't know how your situation may be helping others. We don't know. We just don't know. So for me, surrender is like actually an act of humility, meaning we don't know. So I don't know how to deal with this. This is like overwhelming. I don't know what to do. Then I go, okay, that too. I surrender that. And then keep going.
Yes.
So I don't see it as giving up. I think it's about recognizing that there are patterns, energy, life at work that we don't understand. And it's totally mysterious. Maybe someday that some of those mysteries will become more open to us, right? But and it sometimes sounds so cliched to say, well, life's on your side, life is on you, because when you're really suffering, you can hardly spit it out. Yeah, life is on my side.
Yeah.
Doesn't feel like life is on your side. But if life is infinite and we are part of that, then we don't know what this means. It could
Yeah.
mean the most amazingly beautiful, wonderful thing.
Mm.
We just don't know.
Mm.
Why get stuck by it? Surrender it, keep going.
Yeah. It's kind of like just dropping that resistance to not knowing. It's just like
Yeah,
dropping the resistance, and another cliche saying, like, it is what it is. And when you drop the resistance, then it gives you that broader perspective to see things maybe you didn't see before.
yeah. And you may not see them even. I think we so often think we've got to understand everything.
Yeah.
Well, what if the way the universe is put together is so amazingly complex that we'll never understand it? How good would that be?
Mm-hmm.
So
For sure. I'm definitely one of those people. I'm like, I got to figure out why we're here, and like, what's the purpose of this? What's the purpose of human experience? And then I'm like, Lindsay, the purpose is that you're here and you exist. That's it.
yeah, and I think ultimately our mind's actually not capable of really
Yeah.
understanding purpose, because our purpose resides somewhere other than the mind.
Mm-hmm.
The mind doesn't like that. It's like, no, I've got to figure it out.
Yeah.
Or maybe not.
So true. Love it. Love these deep conversations. Well, to respect your time, I have a few more questions for you. One is I call it a selfish question, but as a father of 6 kids and all the work that you do, what's one piece of parenting advice you have for all of us new parents? Me,
Wow.
I'm only 6 months in.
I think almost every parent on the planet, no, actually all parents, or almost all parents, love their kids.
Mm.
And they want to do the best for them.
Mm-hmm.
And then we make all kinds of mistakes. Right? And we beat ourselves up for the mistakes we made. Right?
Yeah.
And my experience is, if you do genuinely love your kids, and most parents do, then do your best. They're way more resilient than you think.
Mm.
Right? Because my kids are all grown. My eldest is 38 now, right? Our baby is 25. And so far, they've all forgiven us.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Because we were far from perfect parents. I have been far from perfect, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think my kids go, yeah, still love you.
Yeah. All I can do is love them, right? That is something I'm releasing, I'm surrendering to it, but it's something I think about just from discovering how much that we carry with us from our childhood. I'm like, oh, I gotta not give them any complexes or like condition them in this certain way. And I'm like, Lindsay, you're human. Like, it's gonna happen.
Definitely going to happen. And that thing that people talk about, they're not really ours, right?
Yeah.
They come through us
Yes.
physically,
Yes.
but they are infinite beings on a karmic journey of their own.
Mm,
Then if that's true, and I think it is,
yeah.
and our job is just one very straightforward thing: love them the best you can, and allow life to show itself. Because
Mm,
we have 6 kids; they are all so different, right?
mm,
It's like, did they possibly come out of the same womb? I don't know how.
so cool. So cool. I'm sure, yeah, to see all their different personalities. Well,
Yeah.
I'm sure people are intrigued by kinesiology and working with you, and especially the fact that we can connect across the world. So, how can people connect with you, work with you, do all the kinesiology things?
So I've got a website, which
Yes.
is www.theclearmindway.com.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So they can just go there, and there's a bit about what I do, and they can book appointments there, and all that stuff is there. And
Perfect.
then I'll see some of the other stuff that I'm doing too. There's some other goodies there as well, not just the kinesiology work, but other stuff as well. So But yeah, that's how it can most easily get to me.
Well, I will link all that for sure. And then my last two questions are probably my favorite questions that I ask. And I can maybe guess what the answer to this one is, but what is your favorite alignment activity in this time and space? Like something that you just love to do for just the sake of doing it. And like you said, you get in that flow state, like time and space don't exist.
Yeah, and it kind of sounds totally non-spiritual, right? But I love it. I love the first morning cup of coffee.
Mm-hmm.
And I sit on a veranda that looks over what's behind me. And the bird, early in the morning here, the bird life is just amazing. So I love sitting with a cup of coffee, watching the ducks. We've got about 15 or 20 ducks that live here, and 3 horses and wallabies and kangaroos that come by, and lots of birds. So sitting with a cup of coffee and listening and watching that is like beautiful.
Sounds magical. Mentally, I'm right there. It's 8 p.m. or like 9 p.m. here in Phoenix. So mentally, I'm in the morning Australia with my cup of coffee. That sounds amazing. I love that answer. And then my last one is, if you gave your parenting advice, but if you had to just give one piece of general advice to anyone on this spiritual path, what would that be? That's a hard one too.
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately there's nothing wrong with you.
Yeah, that doesn't even need explanation. Mic drop. Feel that in my soul.
Yeah, I think so.
Ian, thank you so much for sharing your journey and your message and your energy. You just have such pure energy. It's been such a joy to connect with you. Thank you so much for coming on.
Wow, it's really a pleasure. Really good to meet you. Knowing that you're in Phoenix, it makes me feel homesick for the States. I love the States. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Ian, again, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. You have such beautiful, calm, peaceful energy. And I know that conversation is going to resonate with so many people. So if you're interested on going deeper with Ian, you can visit his website, theclearmindway.com. Of course, I will link that wherever you are listening to this episode, whether it's on the podcast platform or on YouTube. So you can go check that out. If you have any takeaways, please share them with me over on Instagram at Lindsay with an A M Tanner. If you're new here, please subscribe. We have new episodes every week, sometimes multiple times a week. And we're always talking about what it means to live our most aligning lives. And as I mentioned in the beginning of this episode with my little advertisement, I am teaching a course on how to go even deeper in your alignment, and it starts March 6th. So if you want more information, go check out last episode before this one. I think it was episode 117, I believe, with all of the details. Or of course, you can reach out to me on Instagram or through email with any questions you have. But I'm so excited to have those of you that are ready or feel the nudge to go even deeper into your alignment and into your internal guidance. So sending you all so much love, all of the high vibes, all the gratitude, and of course, I will see you next week on Alignment Adventures.